For the sake of transparency, it's been, I think, over a month since we played Halo 5 at this point. So it's not exactly super fresh on my mind.
It's called Real Thoughts, not Fresh Thoughts.
Well, I mean, it opens up with recently I played through, so it's not quite the most recent. And then also, for the sake of transparency, I streamed this to my PC through a Android emulator, which I then played with my controller, which is not the normal way that I play games. I normally play with a mouse and keyboard straight on PC. So this was not at all the optimal way for me to play, so I'm not going to complain too much about how the game felt, because there was a lot of input delay, and there were certain issues I was having, like charging up a plasma pistol didn't work because it didn't detect my inputs for like holding down a button for that, I guess. But we can talk about the story and we can talk about the level design, because I think the actual gameplay of Halo 5 doesn't deserve all the hate it gets. I understand why people don't like it, because after the controversial changes that Halo 4 added into the game, people wanted to see a return to form, and instead they sort of pushed it in the opposite direction with the advanced movement. I personally enjoy the advanced movement, especially when I played stuff on Halo 5 Forge, which is the PC version, which I was able to actually use with my mouse and keyboard. I understand why people don't like it, because it's not similar at all to the previous Halos. The story requires you to have read or watched or played so many things. It's like, number one, you need to have played Spartan Ops for Halo 4, which people are like, okay, we'll just play Spartan Ops. Well, this is a game on Xbox One. Halo 4 came out for the 360. I think it may have also came out for the Xbox One. It was like one of the early games.
It was with Master Chief Collection.
Okay, so it wasn't on Xbox One originally.
Yeah, but I mean, even still, Spartan Ops was so tucked away. It was so far tucked away in the settings in MCC that it might as well have not even been there.
You're expected to have played through Spartan Ops, so you can know who the fuck Jul 'Mdama is. I've played Spartan Ops previously, so that wasn't a huge issue for me. But to be expected to know that kind of thing going into it, and this isn't the first Halo to do that, to be fair, Halo 3 had that problem as well. There was a whole console gap where Halo 2 ends, then Halo 3 picks up, but Halo 3 is a brand new game on the Xbox 360, so people are getting into the series for the first time and will have no idea what the fuck is going on. It's worse in Halo 5, because you require not just having played Halo 4, because honestly, the only thing you need to know from Halo 4 is that Cortana was dead, so you will have had to have known that. They don't introduce Locke, they don't introduce his team, they don't introduce Blue Team. The only way you would know who Blue Team was...
You have to read the books, but Locke, no, you see, you forgot. See, if you purchased Master Chief Collection, you got to watch that shitty show.
Yeah, they had the Halo 2 anniversary cutscene with Locke in it, and then they had Halo Nightfall, which I believe is sitting at a 37% on Rotten Tomatoes, so expecting anybody to sit through that was a poor choice. Blue Team, yeah, you would have had to have read the books. They don't introduce Locke's team at all, and they're not even in Nightfall. So, like, they have 3 new characters, and they do a little bit of characterization of the characters in the game, but they do it in a way that doesn't really make sense. It's meant for the audience and not for a narrative sense. So there's like information about the characters that they just sort of blurt out that the team would have already known because they've been working together for a while, which they do mention that they have been working together for a while. Buck being a Spartan is a brand new thing. The last time we saw him was ODST, and even if you've read the books, I'm not sure that's covered in the books.
Could be wrong. That might be in New Blood. I think it's in one of the books. I haven't read it, but I think it was covered in the books. So for me, Halo 5, I mean, it's got a lot of issues with the story, and like in concept, it kind of sounds like it could have worked. See, it's a double-edged sword because it requires so much knowledge of Halo stuff before playing the game, and it's not a fresh start for anyone, despite it having been many years since we had gotten to see, Chief again. Or I guess not that many. God, I guess it was only like, 2, 3? I don't know. Felt longer. But anyway.
2012 to 2015, it was 3 years, yeah.
It sounds like it could have been cool on paper. It's a double-edged sword because, yeah, it requires so much knowledge going into the game. So then it pushes away casual fans. But then for hardcore fans, even if you do know literally everything about Halo that there is to know going into the game, it does absolutely nothing with it. Yeah, I mean, you don't know who Jul 'Mdama is unless you play Spartan Ops, but even then, if you played Spartan Ops and read the comics, Jul Mdama dies in a cutscene 10 minutes into the game in a flash. So it's just like, even if you did know who Jul Mdama was, like, it doesn't really have any purpose. And it's the game wants you to know so much, but then it doesn't reward you for that. It's like, it would be like going to see Endgame, but then like that final awesome scene was really shitty. Because it's like you're supposed to like know a lot going into the movie, and then you have the payoff of, oh well, I already know all these characters and everything, I'm getting to see them. But if we were in some alternate universe where that end scene just sucked, that's Halo 5.
Yeah, and on that same vein, like, Blue Team doesn't do anything in campaign. Like, if you were to take out Blue Team from the campaign, it wouldn't be any different. If it was just Master Chief, it would play exactly the same. I really think the only reason that they did include Blue Team was because they wanted to have that 4 unique players on the Chief side, like they did for Locke, which doesn't make any sense, because Chief hasn't been with Blue Team ever in the games. And they don't introduce them. They mention like 2 of the characters' names in the first cutscene, and then they eventually start talking about them a little bit, but they don't really throw out enough detail on like why they're back or why they're there at all. Because if you are a fan of the books, you would know they're back. If you haven't read the books, they're completely new characters. Like, they don't introduce why they're there at all. And then they just help Chief go AWOL. So it's like, okay, 4 fucking Spartans just agree to this. They don't try to talk him out of it. Are they good friends? I have no idea. They're also characterized, like every character in this game is characterized as kind of stupid, because one of my favorite stupid lines was, the Warden Eternal shows up for the first time. He introduces himself as the Warden Eternal, the Guardian for Cortana, blah, blah, blah. Then you defeat him, and then the first thing someone does is ask, who was that? Oh, that was the Warden Eternal. It's like, what the fuck kind of question and answer was that? That was so badly written. And there's so many questions that are like that. In terms of, if we want to switch off from just shitting on the story, because everybody has done that at this point, so, everybody knows the story's bad. The level design is kind of similar. Every single level feels kind of the same, where you start off in sort of a smallish area, you're let out to fight some enemies, you go through kind of a linear section. Every level ends in sort of an arena, where you just kind of fight enemies as they show up, and then you get a cutscene, and you go to the next thing.
Yeah, it's very uninspired. I mean, it's definitely not the worst thing I've ever played. It's definitely not the worst thing you've played on this channel either. But, it's just so middle of the road. It's gameplay wise in the campaign, it's completely inoffensive, but doesn't do anything cool at all. Every now and then there'll be a moment where it's just like, okay, this is kind of neat. Like the Swords of St. Helios part. I think most people, whenever they talk about Halo 5, in anything positive, they always bring up those missions, because those really are like the only levels in the game where it feels like they put any effort. And even then, it's not like mind blowing, but compared to the rest of the game, it's still a little better, and it's still a little better than some stuff in Halo 4 as well. Actually, I mean, I would probably say most stuff in Halo 4. I feel like gameplay-wise, Halo 4 is still probably the worst out of the 343 games.
Yes, gameplay-wise, I totally agree. Halo 4, especially the weapon sandbox. The weapon sandbox in Halo 5 is actually really good. Anybody who's played Halo 5 will probably agree, because they've balanced it more on every weapon being viable. So it's, in my opinion, the weapons are actually even better than they've done in previous Halos, because there's not a super reliance on precision weaponry in this game, because every single weapon can be utilized. It's not that some weapons are better in other instances, so it's like with Halo 3 and Halo Reach, precision weapons are good at medium distances, so you're going to be using them 99% of the time, or a power weapon, because any other close range weapons will get you too close to enemies or other players, and they suck, because you have to do so much damage, and they'll just kill you from a medium range. But with this, pretty well balanced, so you can have those precision weapons that reward you for being precise, or you can have the less accurate weapons that you can still utilize at a good distance away. And in the campaign, it feels fine. The AI is kind of stupid, but the weapons feel good to use against them. I really love what they did with the plasma caster in 5, because when they introduced it as the concussion rifle in Reach, it sucked. It was really bad. It's like a little bouncy grenade launcher thing, does barely any damage. Halo 4, it's still kind of the same thing. I don't remember. I think it's called the plasma caster in Halo 4. In Halo 5, it does the bouncy thing, or you can charge it up into like a cluster of sticky bombs, and that's really cool. And then they take a lot of the Promethean weapons that in Halo 4 were introduced as just kind of variants of an assault rifle, a DMR, whatever, and they gave them their own unique role. So like the suppressor starts off slow and gets faster and faster. The bolt shot has like a 3-round burst. The light rifle has like more powerful, precise shots than like the DMR. I don't think they're quite as unique because they were introduced as like a less unique variant, but they're much more fun to use than they were in Halo 4. And also, to go back to those Sanghelios missions, the Sanghelios missions almost seem like if Halo 5 were a spin-off game starring Locke, and they had more missions that were focused around Locke going to different places and sort of helping out off the books, because the Sanghelios mission was told to him that if it doesn't go well, we were never there. Like, this was an off-the-books thing. Like, you shouldn't actually be there. That would kind of been interesting, like a Black Ops for Halo. Because the Sanghelios missions give some characterization to Locke that we don't see from the rest of the game. It's like, Locke wanted to get rid of the Arbiter, and we'd learn that through the Arbiter to Locke. Like, they're talking to each other directly about this. Like, when the Arbiter sided with the humans, Locke thought that was a totally dangerous idea, because the Arbiter was the one who launched a direct campaign against the humans during the events of Halo 1. And so we sort of see that sort of dichotomy. It's like, well, the Arbiter did help us out in Halo 2, indirectly mostly, and then in Halo 3. So we know the Arbiter's a good guy at this point, but we also can see that perspective from Locke that we shouldn't maybe trust the Arbiter because he is an alien and he definitely slaughtered a bunch of humans. So that would have been interesting if they had gone into more of the sort of moral choices of the Halo series, but they don't do that. And all the missions involving Locke hunting down Chief are really lame and culminate about halfway through the game in a super lame fist fight. That's like, I don't know if they had something else planned and didn't have time to do it and just had to do that instead. But not only is it lame to watch, it's poorly choreographed, so it looks like two old men trying to punch each other.
I think that sentence you just said, that it looks like something that they had an idea for and then they said, let's do this instead, I think that summarizes the whole game.
And it's weird because the opening cutscene of like the Spartans jumping out of the back of whatever I think it's a Pelican or something, I don't know, whatever their ship is, and then flying down and like running down a mountain. One of them breaks through a fucking rock. Like they're doing all this kind of acrobatic shit. Like they know Spartan 4s are super fast and acrobatic. So when they get to that bit where Chief fights Locke in a regular ass fist fight, it feels really out of place. Because they've already established Spartan 4s are super fast and are very strong. And we know Master Chief, from having played previous games, can do incredible things. So it could have been a huge climax. And if that was cool, I think that could have forgiven the rest of the game for being a little bit lame. Maybe. I have no idea.
Yeah, we don't really get anything. We don't really get any kind of payoff at all in that game.
The mission genesis at the beginning when you are on a Guardian and it falls and you use your mag boots to like jump down its spine is pretty cool. That's a neat idea. That is like one of the only really cool, neat ideas in this game in terms of level design. The Kraken is kind of cool, but it's ultimately they've done that before with the Scarabs and then the Lich in Halo 4. So we've seen it. So it's not that unique. But the Guardian running thing was the ending of this game ends on a cliffhanger. The Master Chief gets locked up by Cortana. Osiris comes to rescue him. They rescue him. Cortana goes away, and that's it. That's the end of the game. Like, none of the plot points they introduced are ever resolved. They don't resolve Cortana being evil because she's still around. They don't resolve Locke hunting down Chief because he just decides not to after he finds out Cortana's evil and that's why Chief is there. He just decides to help them, and that sort of fizzles out. And then all 6 other characters in the game are completely irrelevant to the plot. It was hard to tell how good the game looked from my streaming perspective because I was playing the game in 720p stream quality, so it was more often than not probably 480p. So it looked good from my end. I don't know if it really was all that good, but 343 really does know how to do visual design for exterior scenes. I really liked the way that St. Helios looked. I really liked the way that Genesis, the natural formations on Genesis looked. I still don't like the clean aesthetic of Forerunner stuff in Halo 4 and 5, so I'm glad they're going away from that for Infinite to go back towards original designs. But the actual amount of detail and stuff was really cool, and seeing St. Helios for the first time was neat, and I just wish they had done more with seeing locations we knew existed, like going to places we hadn't seen, or maybe going back to Reach or something for whatever reason. They would have to rewrite the plot, but that would have been kind of cool. The hub areas are completely useless. I don't know why those were included at all, just to pad the game out, I think. To be fair, there are some neat lore things. I remember on St. Helios, there is a really neat little area where there's a triage unit, where there is a St. Helios doctor convincing the warriors that it's not brave to die of a wound off the battlefield, and that he is fighting death for them, so he is as much a warrior to them as they are to St. Helios, which was a really neat thing that sets the elites up as this unique alien species, because they're not like humans. They're very onto that honor thing, which is very Japanese of them, because they're pretty much like samurai, which is apparent in the early games as well, with their big glowing swords and their ranking structure, which was really neat. And I wish we had seen more of that in actual cutscenes and stuff, rather than something you may or may not stumble across, because I would wager most people don't know that bit exists unless they specifically sought it out or read extended lore about the elites. So that was cool, and I wish they had done more of that, because 343 can write interesting things. Halo 5 just isn't, but they're sprinkled in little things. Halsey talking about the fact that she knows Cortana is crazy because she knows she is crazy is an interesting little plot thread they threw in. Halsey thought maybe Chief wouldn't be strong enough to take down Cortana by himself because of his relation to her, so she entrusts that to Locke, so he's like an impartial third party who will get the job done. That's an interesting thread that doesn't go anywhere because they don't stop Cortana. But having Locke as an opposite end to Chief would have been good if they had written it better.
I never see anyone talk about this, so I do want to just bring it up real quick. As lame as the campaign is, I'm just so grateful that 343 added the Promethean soldiers to the mix.
Yes.
Because it made the Promethean fights so much better. I mean, the fights in general are still kind of mindless firefights, but I don't despise fighting the Prometheans so much in Halo 5. And I feel like just them adding another Promethean type helped so much.
Yeah, the Knights only showing up sparsely and being beefier made more sense because of the soldiers than in Halo 4, where it was only the Knights and maybe some of the dogs, because those Knights were so fucking beefy.
And then those god-awful Watchers.
Yeah, the Watchers were not nearly as bad in 5.
Yeah, the soldiers were honestly a lifesaver.
Yeah, in the completely accurate summary, I joke about the fact that they don't introduce the soldiers at all. The only time they mention them is as if they already knew what they were. That's fine. They introduced new enemy types in the previous Halos without really introducing them. They just say a name. It's oh, buggers. Yeah, buggers just show up in Halo 2. And then I'm so glad. I really hope buggers don't show up again in Infinite, by the way. I fucking hate buggers. So overall, I wouldn't really recommend Halo 5 unless you're going to be playing the multiplayer. I played a little bit of Firefight with Temmi because I wanted to try it out. It was kind of miserable because of my lag, but the idea is cool. I'm hoping we get to see some form of that Infinite, because a PvE mode that's wave-based, that's like Firefight, but not just endless, and it doesn't just, it's got some thematic elements to it, some narrative elements to it.
Halo 5's frustrating because it does some things better than 4 did, but also does some things worse than 4 did somehow. I don't know, but at the end of the day, I think I'd still rather play 5. I mean, I'll skip the cutscenes, but if I'm forced to play either 4 or 5, I'm just gonna play 5.
Yeah, I think so too. If I were to play it in a normal sense, if I had to play it between streaming it to my PC and playing Halo 4 natively, I'd choose Halo 4, but if I could do both natively, I'd play Halo 5. The multiplayer, even, I would say, does some things the best of any of the Halo games, like the weapon sandbox I already said. And as much as people hate Sprint, the version of Sprint they have in 5 is the most balanced, because they have mechanics like when you're sprinting, your shields don't regenerate, so you don't want to leave a fight unless you really are confident that you can get away in time to get your shields to recharge, because there is that wait period after you're sprinting before your shields start to recharge, whereas in Reach and 4, they would just automatically start recharging after a certain amount of time, so running away was a viable option. There's also, when you're sprinting, you can do the slam out of it to prevent sprint melee cheesing like you could do in Halo Reach. I don't know if you could do it in Halo 4, but that was a problem with Reach, where you could sprint, punch, sprint again, punch again really quickly, and nobody could do anything about it because you were too fast. The advanced movement mechanics, you can take them or leave them. I like the slide. I wish the slide was a little bit more like Apex, where there is momentum carried through with it. Being able to jump into the air, hold yourself, and do a ground slam, kind of pointless. I don't think I ever really utilized that as like an actual mechanic.
I used to play Halo 5 a lot, and I only got 1 kill out of that. So like, and like most people just don't even bother. It is one of the most useless moves.
And then clambering. I don't even understand why people think clambering is bad. Being able to recover from a shitty jump is important to making it feel responsive. So I can totally understand people liking crouch jumping, and you can still do crouch jumping, but having both is good, better than having one or the other, because that way for people who are less skilled, they can still climb up, and it'll take them a little bit longer than a perfect crouch jump, but it's still there for people. So I enjoyed the movement mechanics, and I'm probably going to enjoy even not having them in Infinite, because I really love Apex, and I think Halo 5 plays somewhat similarly to Apex, and I think it was inspired somewhat by the success of Titanfall.